The massive observation window of the Galactic Council's main chamber showed the endless expanse of space, dotted with countless stars. Below it, Council Member Davis rubbed his temples in frustration as he listened to the latest report. "Another dead end?" he asked, looking at the holographic display. "Not exactly, sir," replied James Miller, straightening his research uniform. He was the youngest lead researcher in the Council's history, but today his eyes showed the excitement of a child who had just found buried treasure. "We found something at the edge of the spiral arm. Something big." The chamber's lights dimmed as Miller activated his presentation. The hologram shifted to show a massive cluster of ships floating silently in the void of space. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, arranged in a perfect defensive formation despite being completely lifeless. "An ancient fleet," Miller explained, his voice steady despite his excitement. "Our initial scan suggests these ships are over 15,000 years old." Laughter erupted from the alien representatives. A tall, blue-skinned council member stood up, his crystalline eyes glinting with amusement. "Look at those primitive designs. Metal hulls. Chemical propulsion traces. This is hardly worth our time." Miller zoomed in on one of the larger ships. "With all due respect, Council Member Blue, I disagree. These ships might look simple, but they've survived 15,000 years in deep space. Their hulls show minimal degradation despite their age. Probably just good quality metal." Someone shouted from the back, triggering another wave of laughter. Director Reed, Miller's superior, cleared his throat. "While the discovery is interesting, what makes you think this warrants a full council meeting?" Miller tapped his data pad, and the hologram shifted again. "Because of this." The image showed a close-up of one of the ship's airlocks. Despite the ancient metal's weathering, a symbol was clearly visible, a stylized eagle with spread wings, clutching what appeared to be an olive branch and arrows. The chamber fell silent. That's impossible," Director Reed whispered. "That's a human symbol. From Earth." "Yes," Miller confirmed. "And it's on every single ship in the fleet." "Preposterous." Council Member Blue slammed his hand on the table. "Humans achieved spaceflight barely 3 centuries ago. They're practically children in galactic terms." Miller kept his cool. "That's what our records show, yes, but these ships tell a different story. We've done every possible dating test. The results are conclusive. These ships were built over 15,000 years ago." The council chamber erupted in heated discussions. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as newcomers, a species that had achieved faster than light travel relatively recently. The idea that they had built this ancient fleet was absurd to most council members. "I request permission to lead a detailed investigation," Miller said, raising his voice above the chaos. "There could be valuable technology aboard these ships. At the very least, we need to understand how they've survived this long." Director Reed leaned forward. "And what if you find nothing? What if these are just abandoned vessels that somehow got marked with human symbols?" "Then we'll know for sure," Miller replied. "But if I'm right, this could change everything we think we know about human history." The council members continued to laugh and joke among themselves, making remarks about primitive human engineering and ancient space junk. But Council Member Davis raised his hand for silence. "Permission granted, Researcher Miller. You have 1 month to investigate." But he added with a slight smile, "Don't expect to find anything revolutionary. Those ships are probably as basic on the inside as they look on the outside." Miller nodded and gathered his materials. As he left the chamber, he could still hear the amused discussions behind him. Let them laugh, he thought. He had seen the preliminary scans of the fleet's power cores, barely detectable but still active after 15,000 years. Whatever these ships were, they weren't primitive at all. He looked down at his data pad, where another scan result blinked steadily. A faint but consistent energy signature, coming from deep within the fleet's flagship. Something was still active in there, waiting. And James Miller was going to find out what it was. The small research ship docked with the ancient fleet's flagship, with a soft metallic thud. Inside the airlock, Miller checked his team's environment suits one last time. Next to him, Captain Stone adjusted her helmet lights. "Remember," Miller said through the radio, "we're the first people to set foot in these ships in 15,000 years. Be careful what you touch." The team of 5 moved through the airlock slowly. Their lights cut through the darkness, revealing long corridors that seemed surprisingly clean for their age. There was no dust, no decay, just emptiness. "This doesn't make sense," said Tom Baker, their engineering expert. "These halls should be falling apart after so long. Look at the floor. It's like someone cleaned it yesterday." Miller ran his scanner over the walls. The whole ship has some kind of preservation field. Very weak, but still working after all this time. They reached what appeared to be the bridge. The door opened smoothly, without any rust or resistance. Inside, rows of control panels lined the walls, their surfaces dark and silent. "Primitive," they said, Captain Stone muttered, running her gloved hand over one of the panels. "These look more advanced than what we use today." Suddenly, a soft blue light flickered across the bridge. Baker jumped back. "I didn't touch anything." "No," Miller said, checking his scanner. "The ship is reacting to our presence. Look at these readings. The power systems are waking up." The team spread out across the bridge, documenting everything. Miller moved to what seemed to be the captain's chair. Unlike the sleek designs used in modern ships, this one was made of actual metal and some kind of synthetic fabric. But when he looked closer, he saw tiny circuits woven into the material. "Found something," called out Dr. Rivera, their data specialist. She stood in front of an open panel, examining what looked like a storage unit. "These are data cores. Hundreds of them." Miller joined her. The cores were unlike anything he had seen before, crystal-like structures housed in metal frames. "Can you read them?" "They're encrypted," Rivera replied, connecting her scanner. "But, wait, this is weird. The encryption looks like a modern human military code, just incredibly complex." "That's impossible," Captain Stone said. "These ships are thousands of years older than any human encryption system." Miller thought for a moment. Unless our modern encryption is based on this ancient system, we might have been rediscovering our own technology without knowing it." As they continued their exploration, they found more surprises. The engine room revealed propulsion systems that only looked chemical-based on the surface. Hidden underneath were devices that defied their scanning equipment. "Chief Baker," Miller called out, "what do you make of this?" Baker studied the engine core. "It's like they deliberately made it look simple on the outside. But this inner layer, some of this technology doesn't match anything in our database. It's beyond what we have now." "Director Reed is going to love this," Captain Stone said with a smile. Miller was about to respond when a new sound filled the ship, a low hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The lights on the bridge grew brighter. "What's happening?" Rivera asked, backing away from her console. "The ship," Miller said, checking his readings. "It's not just waking up anymore. It's activating something." He moved to a central console where symbols were appearing. Clear, crisp English letters forming words on the screen. "Human presence DETCTED. DNA verification required. INITYATINGCQRIT Protogsevolas." "DNA verification," Captain Stone read over his shoulder. "The ship wants to confirm we're human." Miller stared at the screen, his heart racing. "All this time, we thought we were a young species just learning to explore space. But what if we were wrong? What if we're not discovering our future out here? We're rediscovering our past," Rivera finished. The ship's hum grew louder, and more systems began to power up around them. On the main screen, a new message appeared. "Wo ar ning. Leviel 1 RCHIVs XCESSIDL. Teo Chetan. Historical data contains critical information." Furo CEED with VERFOTH. Miller looked at his team, then pressed yes on the ancient but somehow familiar interface. Whatever their ancestors had left behind on this ship, it was time to learn the truth. The ancient ship's main screen flickered to life as Miller pressed his palm against the DNA scanner. Red warning symbols flashed across the display, followed by blocks of text that made his blood run cold. Security CLEARANC guaranteed. ACCESSOANG historical recordings. Warning. Content stila Sci-Fi. Extinction. Event. Everyone, gather round. Miller called to his team. You need to see this. The screen filled with a recording. The image showed a man in a uniform unlike anything they'd seen before. His face was tired, his eyes heavy with worry. This is Admiral William Cooper, Earth Defense Fleet. The recording began. If you're watching this, humanity has successfully rebuilt itself. The date is March 15, 12,247 BCE by your calendar. This will be our final message before Operation Reset begins. The team stood in stunned silence. Captain Stone whispered, BCE. That's over 14,000 years ago. The admiral in the recording continued. 3 months ago, we detected them entering our galaxy. We call them the Destroyers. They move between galaxies, consuming all advanced civilizations they find. Their technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. The screen split, showing images of massive black ships that seemed to absorb light itself. The footage showed entire planets going dark as these ships passed. We fought them, Admiral Cooper said. God help us, we fought with everything we had. But they're too strong. Too many. We lost colonies, lost Earth, lost everything except this fleet and a handful of hidden bunkers on Earth. Dr. Rivera's scanner beeped rapidly as it recorded everything. This explains the gaps in Earth's archaeological record. The missing civilizations. We didn't start over because we destroyed ourselves, Miller realized. We started over to hide. The Admiral's image returned. Our scientists found their weakness. The destroyers only target civilizations above a certain technological level. They ignore primitive worlds. So we made a choice, the hardest choice in human history. Baker leaned forward. They deliberately reduced humanity back to the Stone Age. This fleet contains everything, the Admiral continued. Our history, our technology, our weapons, all hidden in plain sight, disguised as primitive vessels. The destroyers will return. They always do, searching every galaxy in a cycle. When they come back, humanity must be ready. The screen showed technical diagrams. The fleet's true capabilities, weapon systems beyond their current understanding, and defense networks hidden throughout the galaxy. We scattered our people across Earth's safe zones, erased all traces of advanced technology, left only myths and legends as warnings. This fleet will wait, powered by cores that will last millennia, until humanity reaches space again and finds us. If you are seeing this, it means our plan worked. You survived. You rebuilt, but now you must prepare. Miller's hands shook as he downloaded the data. The Council needs to see this immediately. They won't believe it, Captain Stone said. They still think we're just a young species that got lucky with technology. The Admiral's final message played. The destroyers follow patterns. They'll return to this galaxy soon. The fleet's sensors are already detecting their long-range signals. You have months, maybe a year at most. Everything you need is here. The weapons, the shields, the real history of humanity. Use it. Defend what we died protecting. The screen went dark, then lit up with streams of technical data. Weapons specifications, shield frequencies, construction plans for devices that broke the laws of physics as they knew them. This changes everything, Rivera said, her voice trembling. We're not just some young species fumbling our way into space. We're survivors. Where? A new alarm cut through the ship. On the main screen, ancient sensor data merged with modern readings. At the edge of the galaxy, something massive was moving. Something that absorbed all light around it. Miller grabbed his communicator. "This is Research Team 1. Emergency priority message for the Council. We need." The ship's lights flashed red. On every screen, in every language humanity had ever used, one message repeated over and over. "They have returned. Defense pur to cos initya. Ing. Al suestiums activating." 15,000 years, Miller said quietly. Our ancestors prepared for 15,000 years for this moment. He looked at his team, their faces illuminated by the red warning lights. And now we're out of time. The ancient fleet, hidden in plain sight for millennia, began to power up around them. The destroyers were coming, just as their ancestors had warned. But this time, humanity wasn't starting from scratch. This time, they were ready. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. The holographic displays showed the massive black ships entering the galaxy's outer rim. 3 council worlds had already gone dark. How is this possible? Director Reed's voice shook. Our best defense systems didn't even slow them down. Miller stood before the council, his research team behind him. The chamber screen showed feeds from multiple worlds, advanced civilizations falling one after another to the destroyer ships. "Colony 7 is gone," someone shouted. Total communication blackout. Council Member Blue, who had laughed at Miller's discovery just days ago, now looked pale. "These ships, they're absorbing our weapons fire like it's nothing. Because they've seen it all before," Miller explained, pulling up the ancient data. 15,000 years ago, our ancestors fought them with technology even more advanced than what we have now. These destroyers adapt to anything they've encountered before. The chamber shook as emergency alarms blared. On the main screen, a destroyer vessel appeared at the edge of the council space. It was enormous, like a piece of space had come alive and decided to devour everything in its path. New report. Captain Stone rushed in, holding a datapad. The destroyers just hit the Centauri defense line. 300 ships gone in minutes. Council Member Davis stood up. "How long do we have?" "At their current speed." Miller checked the calculations. Less than 6 hours before they reached this system. The chamber erupted in panic. Some council members called for evacuation. Others demanded they gather all available ships for a final stand. None of their plans would work. Miller knew that now. "Listen," he shouted over the chaos. "We have a chance, but you need to trust me. Trust humanity." The room fell silent again. "The ancient fleet," he continued, "it's not just a collection of old ships. It's a trap. A weapon built by our ancestors specifically to fight the destroyers." Director Reed leaned forward. "The fleet you said we shouldn't laugh at." "Yes." Miller activated a new hologram, showing the ancient fleet's true specifications. Everything about those ships is designed to deceive. They look primitive because they're meant to. The destroyers ignore anything they think isn't a threat. On the screens around them, more worlds went dark. The destroyers were getting closer. "How do we know your ancient fleet will work?" Council Member Blue demanded. "If your ancestors were so advanced, why did they hide instead of fighting?" "They did fight." Captain Stone stepped forward. "They fought and learned the destroyer's weakness. But the solution took time they didn't have. So they hid humanity, preserved their knowledge, and built weapons the enemy wouldn't recognize." The chamber shook again. Another alarm sounded. "Destroyer scout ship detected." Someone shouted, entering the outer system. Miller took a deep breath. "We need to act now. The fleet's activation sequence is already running, but we need your help. The ships need to be integrated with modern defense networks. You want us to link our systems to ships that are thousands of years old." Council Member Blue scoffed. A massive explosion lit up the screens. The scout ship had just destroyed an entire defense platform with a single shot. Yes, Miller said firmly, because right now, those ancient ships are the only thing in this galaxy the destroyers haven't adapted to yet. Director Reed stood up. Do it. Whatever you need, you have full authorization. Miller nodded to his team. Dr. Rivera immediately began transmitting commands to the ancient fleet. Throughout the system, ships that had appeared dead and primitive for millennia started to change. Energy spike detected in the ancient fleet. Baker called out, "It's working." On the main screen, the first of the ancient ships began to transform. Layers of primitive metal fell away, revealing gleaming surfaces underneath. Hidden weapon systems emerged from secret compartments. Engines that had seemed chemical-based blazed with power that defied modern physics. By the stars, Council Member Davis whispered. Miller watched as the ancient fleet awakened, a plan 15,000 years in the making finally coming to fruition. Now, he said quietly, we show them why you should never laugh at human engineering. The battle for survival was about to begin, and humanity's greatest secret was their only hope for victory. The ancient flagship's bridge hummed with power as Miller and his team worked frantically at the controls. Around them, holographic displays showed the destroyer scout ship moving closer to the Council's main world. Final activation sequence ready, Dr. Rivera announced, her fingers flying over the ancient console. DNA verification complete on all command systems. Through the bridge windows, Miller watched in awe as the ancient fleet came to life. The seemingly primitive metal hulls split apart like blooming flowers, revealing layers of technology that had waited 15,000 years for this moment. Look at that, Baker whispered, pointing to the sensor readings. The power output is off the charts. Those cores weren't just preserved. They were charging all this time. Captain Stone's voice crackled over the radio. Miller, you need to see this. The fleet's not just transforming, it's combining. She was right. The thousands of scattered ships were moving with purpose now, linking together in precise patterns. Smaller vessels attached to larger ones, forming massive structures that defied conventional ship design. Just like the Admiral's message said, Miller remembered. The fleet isn't a collection of ships. It's one giant weapon, broken into pieces to hide its true nature. The main screen lit up with new warnings. Phase 1, Complete. Fleet SMBLI initiating. Phase 2, Activating Hidden Defense in Work. Warning. Derivational an omem alias DETCTED. Hidden Defense Network. Director Reed's voice came through the communication system. What hidden defense network? His question was answered as space itself seemed to ripple around them. Throughout the system, points of light burst into existence, hundreds of weapon platforms that had been cloaked and dormant for millennia. Our ancestors didn't just leave us a fleet, Miller explained, reading the ancient data as it scrolled past. They scattered weapons and shields throughout every system humans might one day inhabit, all waiting for this moment. A massive shockwave rocked the ship. On the tactical display, they watched the destroyer scout ship fire on one of the Council's worlds. Defensive shields failing on Colonial Station 6. Someone shouted over the general channel. Modern defenses are useless. Now, Miller said, placing his hand on the ancient ship's main control panel. Time to show them what humanity left behind. The panel scanned his DNA one final time. Then the whole ship shuddered. Around them, the combined fleet had formed into something massive. A weapon platform bigger than anything humanity had built since their ancient days. Energy readings at maximum, Rivera reported. The ship's AI is coming online. It's merging with the other vessels. A new voice filled the bridge. Not human, but not quite artificial either. Integration complete. Accessing tactical database. Analyzing QRANT threat. The ships, Baker said in amazement. They're not just machines. They're alive, Miller finished. Our ancestors built them to learn, to adapt. Everything the destroyers could do, but better. The giant scout ship fired again, but this time something was different. One of the hidden platforms activated, creating a shield unlike anything they'd ever seen. The destroyer's weapon simply vanished into it. THUNTRMEASURES engaged, the fleet's AI announced. Deploying Phase 3 defenses. Throughout the system, the ancient weapons platforms began to move, forming a complex web of overlapping fields and defense systems. The combined fleet, now a single massive entity, took up position at the center. Multiple hostile contacts detected. Captain Stone called out, "The main destroyer fleet is arriving." Miller looked at the tactical display as dozens of massive black ships emerged from hyperspace. This was what their ancestors had prepared for, the moment 15,000 years in the making. ALE Art. Destroyer Fleet Composition ATCE is historical records, the AI reported. Engaging combat protocols. The transformed fleet began to glow with energy that had been gathering for millennia. Around them, the hidden defense network hummed to life, ready to protect not just humanity, but all sentient life in the galaxy. "Send word to the Council," Miller ordered. "Tell them to get their remaining ships in position behind us." He looked at the approaching destroyer fleet and smiled grimly. "Let's show them why humanity's ancestors were the most feared engineers in the galaxy." The final battle was about to begin, and 15,000 years of human ingenuity was about to be unleashed. The void of space lit up like a new sun as the first destroyer ship fired at the ancient fleet. The black beam of energy, which had destroyed every modern ship it touched, splashed harmlessly against the fleet's shields. "Direct hit," Baker called out. "Shield strength increasing. That's impossible." But Miller knew what was happening. The shields aren't just blocking their attacks. They're learning from them, just like our ancestors planned. The ancient fleet's AI spoke through the ship's systems. "Destroyer woi apon patiornance analoized." Initiating CUNTRATK. The massive combined fleet, now shaped like a giant arrow of light, split into 3 parts. Each section moved with impossible speed, surrounding the first destroyer ship before it could react. "Energy readings are off the scale," Rivera reported from her station. "The fleet's using their own weapons against them." The ancient ships fired as one. Instead of normal weapons, they released beams of pure white light. Where they hit, the destroyer ship's black surface began to crack, light pouring out from inside. "Tarjihi neutralized," the AI announced as the first destroyer ship shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. But there was no time to celebrate. 20 more destroyer ships warped into the system, their massive forms blocking out the stars. "All Council ships, fall back behind the ancient defense line," Captain Stone ordered through the general channel. "Let the fleet do its work." The destroyers attacked together, their combined firepower enough to shatter planets. The ancient fleet's response was beautiful and terrible to watch. It moved like a living thing, dancing between the black beams, while the hidden defense platforms activated one by one. "Look," Baker pointed at the tactical display. "The platforms are creating some kind of energy web." Streams of light connected each platform, forming a massive net in space. When the destroyers tried to move through it, their ships slowed down, caught like flies in a spider's web. "Now," Miller commanded, "hit them while they're trapped." The ancient fleet reformed into its arrow shape and charged. Modern weapons might have been useless, but these weapons had been specifically designed to fight the destroyers. Each hit caused more cracks in their seemingly invincible ships, more light pouring out from inside. "They're not just destroying them," Rivera realized, watching the sensor data. "They're unmaking them somehow, breaking down the very thing that makes them invincible." 3 more destroyer ships shattered, then 5 more. But the remaining enemies adapted quickly, changing their tactics. "They're targeting the defense platforms," Captain Stone warned. Two platforms exploded before the fleet could respond. The energy web weakened, allowing several destroyer ships to break free. They immediately headed toward the Council's main world. "Rerouting power to remaining platforms," Miller ordered. "We can't let them reach the planet." The ancient fleet split again, this time into 7 parts. Each section began to spin, creating massive whirlpools of energy in space. The destroyers got caught in the artificial gravity wells, unable to move forward. "Engaging FINAL County or mini-ASUREs," the AI announced. "Warning. Power core strain critical." The spinning sections of the fleet began to glow brighter and brighter. Light poured from every seam and joint, turning the ships into miniature suns. "What's happening?" Director Reed's voice came through the comm. "The energy readings. Our ancestors built these ships to win at any cost," Miller explained, understanding at last, even if it meant sacrificing the fleet itself. The ancient ships detonated in coordinated sequence, each explosion precisely calculated. The release of 15,000 years of stored energy created a wave of light that washed over the remaining destroyer ships. Where the wave touched, the black ships began to dissolve, not with violence or explosions, but simply coming apart at their most basic level, their supposedly invincible material breaking down into harmless particles. When the light faded, the destroyers were gone, but so was most of the ancient fleet. "Damage report," Miller asked quietly. "The main fleet is gone," Rivera answered, "but the defense platforms are intact. And look, some of the smaller ships survived." On the tactical display, a handful of the ancient vessels still floated in formation. Their surfaces were scarred and damaged, but they were intact, living proof of humanity's greatest achievement. "Send word to the Council," Miller said. Tell them humanity's ancestors say hello. The battle was over. The galaxy was safe. And no one would ever laugh at human engineering again." 1 month after the battle, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. Where alien representatives had once laughed at primitive human engineering, they now stood in respectful silence as Miller presented his final report. "The remaining ancient ships have revealed more of our true history," Miller said, standing before the enlarged council. Every spacefaring race had sent representatives after news of the battle spread. Our ancestors didn't just build weapons. They left us a roadmap to our past and our future. The main screen showed one of the surviving ships, its battle-scarred hull now a badge of honor. Around it, research vessels from every council race worked together, studying its secrets. How much knowledge did they preserve? Council Member Blue asked. Gone was his previous arrogance, replaced by genuine curiosity. Miller gestured, and a holographic display filled with data. "We've only scratched the surface. The ships contain libraries of advanced technology, scientific discoveries, and historical records. But most importantly, they contain warnings." "More threats like the destroyers?" Director Reed asked. "No," Miller replied. "Warnings about our own nature, about the dangers of pride and isolation." He looked around the chamber. "Our ancestors didn't just leave us weapons. They left us wisdom." Captain Stone stepped forward with a datapad. "We found coordinates throughout the galaxy, hidden bunkers, research stations, and defense platforms. Humanity didn't just hide on Earth. They scattered their knowledge across the stars, protecting it until we were ready." The chamber's screens showed new discoveries. Massive underground facilities on distant moons, orbital stations disguised as asteroids, and technology far beyond their current understanding, all waiting to be rediscovered. "But here's the most important discovery," Miller continued. "The activation codes for these facilities aren't just keyed to human DNA. They're keyed to combinations of different species' genetic markers. Our ancestors knew that when we returned to space, we wouldn't be alone." A murmur of surprise ran through the chamber. "They wanted us to share this knowledge," he explained, "to learn from their mistakes. They didn't want humanity to face the universe alone again. And we found more survivors, Baker added from his position near the data displays. Small groups of humans in hidden habitats throughout the galaxy, preserved in stasis. Each group with different pieces of our ancient knowledge, waiting to be awakened. Council Member Davis stood. The Council has voted unanimously. Humanity is to be granted a permanent leadership position in all matters regarding galactic defense and technological research. Miller smiled. Our ancestors would be proud, not because we're being given power, but because we're being given a chance to work together with other races. That's what they really wanted. The main screen showed new construction around the surviving ancient ships. Modern technology merged with the old, creating something new. Teams of engineers and scientists from every race worked side by side, learning and building together. The destroyers weren't defeated by weapons alone, Miller said. They were defeated by planning, sacrifice, and the hope that one day different species could stand together against any threat. And if other threats come, someone asked from the back of the chamber. Then we'll be ready, Miller replied. Not just humans, but all of us. Our ancestors left us the tools. Now it's up to us to build something better with them. The chamber erupted in applause. Outside the massive windows, the surviving ancient ships floated proudly alongside modern vessels. Their scared hulls told a story of sacrifice and survival, of a legacy preserved through 15,000 years of darkness. One last thing, Miller said as the applause died down. We found this in the flagship's final message. The screen showed a simple text. To our children's children. We hide not in fear, but in hope. We forget not for glory, but for life. We build not for power, but for peace. These stars are your birthright. Share them wisely. As the council members read the message, Miller looked out at the ships again. Somewhere out there, more pieces of humanity's past were waiting to be found. But the future that would be written together by all species, just as their ancestors had hoped. They had fought the darkness, and they had won. Not just for humanity, but for all life in the galaxy. And no one was laughing anymore.